Now, let me introduce you to another visionary, another leader. Leadership is very important. Jean-Pierre Loubineau is involved, and he was my boss 30 years ago, is involved in the UIC. So it's a special project that he will be telling us all about. I believe I need to switch off my computer. And the floor is yours.
Okay. Ça va très bien. Okay. So, well, thank you very much, Gilbert, and hello, everyone. And thanks for the opportunity to open with Don. It's a pleasure and a privilege, this session of Eurotech with some impulse ideas. In a few minutes, I will try to focus on some trends, challenges, and opportunities seen from our UIC window. UIC, as you understand, is the association of all railways in the world. We are representing the worldwide railway community with more than 200 members from 100 countries. We feature, yes, technology, okay. All right, okay. Well, you have the proper person here. We deal mostly on interoperability, standardization, research, asset management for the rail system. And we are promoting rail as a sustainable backbone of a new transportation mix of mobility through approximately 80 conferences, workshops every year on various thematics such as technology, information technology, economics, social issues, sustainable contribution, or education. So this really allows us to have a good vision on these trends I was mentioning, as transport being the mobility of goods and people, which is impacting the economy and which is impacted by the stability of physical or political links in the world. What we can see today is not very enthusiastic. We can see geographical fragmentation. We see political diversity, economical disintegration in some places, and nationalistic focuses in others. So this should not really be in favor of rail development. Why is that? Because rail needs interoperability, high investment, space and time stability for long-term projects with long-term return on these investments. But what happens? What is happening is exactly the opposite. Rail, which has survived the first industrial revolution of the 19th century with steam engine and metallic structures, the energy revolution of the second half of the 20th century with electrification and high-speed systems, and the IT revolution with the global distribution systems, rail is now developing again in the context of this 21st digital revolution century. Why? Because of some fundamental values. Three major ones: capacity, safety, and sustainability. But also a good drive on research and innovation, and wherever rail is developing, the fact that it enables a growth in GDP and jobs everywhere. So this is indeed proven in a global context by the positive perspectives 2050 of growth for the sustainable mobility of goods and people. For freight, all modes together, traffic will be multiplied by 4, with a shift from North Atlantic to North Pacific, with intracontinental increase tremendous, 7-fold in Africa, 4-fold in Asia. And for passenger, the growth worldwide, all modes together, is expected to be more than 50%. But with a boom on intra-urban mobility. One figure here is really striking. In developing countries, the deficit in urban infrastructure is equivalent to 6% of their GDP, when since 2008 it is only 0.5% and no more than 1% in developed countries. So we need to have a new social and economic model of transportation mix. Intra-urban must be more environmental, with electric cars, with tramways, metros, and inter-urban with more capacity and lower cost. So the challenges to answer these trends are very important, with, as you understand, the priority given to urban mobility. All modes will have to work together, taking into account social and economic issues, environmental goals, modal complementarity, management of interfaces between intracity and intercity mobility. All these market trends are really sustained with forecast of important investments. If you go along and trust the OECD figures, it's more than $11,000 billion that will be invested in the next 20 years. So this is not that big, but what is striking is that 40% will be invested in rail. That makes $5,000 billion in the next 10 years invested in the rail projects on 4 major issues. First is the renovation of existing infrastructure. Second is the construction of new lines and the missing links to create international corridors. Third is high-speed lines. There is approximately 12 major projects constructed, under construction, or under study in the world. Turkey, Emirates, Russia, Europe, Japan, India, Morocco, China, and USA. Fourth is intelligent management of assets and capacity, which can be improved thanks to the progress of information technology and Internet of Things. I can identify 5 major trends in the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals for a safe mobility system with, again, rail as a backbone of a multimodal transportation mix. Number 1 is a better complementarity in this 21st century rather than the hyper-competition in the 20th century between modes. In this perspective, stations, smart stations in smart cities, as we are about to see and understand better in this CES tomorrow, and logistical hubs are the new articulations in this new freight or passenger logistical chains. You know, our logistical cost is about 18% of the value of the product. This is far too high. It should be between 3 and 5%. So there is room for progress, and information technology can help. Second, corridors. Corridors must be developed. Of course, in Europe, there is a number of them, 10 approximately now, and there is more to come. But there is also the Trans-Siberian routes and the OBOR, One Belt, One Road project, proved and developed by China and other cross countries. This latter project links Southeast Asia and Western Europe, is probably the major project of the 21st century. So there is here also a big potential for rail and other modes. And here again, the interfacing of processes and exchanges of data along the corridors will probably be helped and boosted by what Gilbert just mentioned, the blockchain technology. Third, being an actor and a vector of this new industrial revolution of digital input, as we were on the 19th century, through the information technology evolution, through the Internet of Things and the blockchain, it is estimated that between 10 and $15 trillion will be added to the global GDP in the next 10 years. The challenge of the big data is not the 3 C's, but the 5 C's for me, which is to collect, to correct, to connect, to correlate, and last but not least, to create. It will impact these big data, services with information and ticketing, predictive maintenance, satellite signaling, and cyber security. Now, fourth trend, we have to capitalize on the fact that rail is a very sustainable mode of transport. You probably all know that 25% of all CO2 emitted in the world comes from the transportation sector, and rail is only accounting 1% of this. But you probably don't know that by 2050, CO2 emissions will grow by 300%. You don't know that urban saturation is costing an extra $200 billion every year. That the development of intelligent mobility in a new optimized and sustainable transportation mix can contribute to a large number of the sustainable development goals and the 2-degree scenarios. Some countries must take the lead in there. We have to go from mitigation, which means the reduction of CO2, to adaptation, which is building together resilient systems. In a scenario aiming to meet the Paris Agreement, which is going to be below the 2-degree scenario, nearly all short or medium aviation activity could be replaced by high speed. And the example of China, which between 2012 and 2015 grew by 170% their high-speed network, is certainly an example that can be trusted and followed. Also, as I said, urban rail is projected to grow by a factor of 6 to 8. Modal shift from private vehicles to more efficient transport modes is expected. And we are about to see here at the CES more electric, autonomous driving vehicles. UIC, with its members, has identified over 1,500 rail projects worth $2 trillion and 120,000 kilometers of tracks. All countries are investing and building, whether they are developed or developing countries. Africa, for example, has the second heavy rail track under construction, 13% of all in the world. And Asia is concentrating 90% of metro track plans or under construction. So investments planned on rail at global level, as I said, is about $5 trillion in the next 10 years. This looks important. It is way too low. It should be around $2 trillion every year. But if you calculate all the savings, all the economies made in comparison to business as usual, these savings over the next 20 years is equivalent to $100 trillion. So here we are a very virtuous circle of investment in mobility. Fifth driver, and I'm coming to the end, is research and innovation. We need boosters. We need boosters like in Europe, the Shift to Rail program, maybe like the EAEC program here, Eurotech. In UIC, we have the International Rail Research Board. Innovation must, in priority, double the capacity of infrastructure, increase by 50% the fiability of equipment, reduce by 50% the life cycle cost, and improve services and again, cyber security. Here, again, this digital input on systems and services can remodel a more efficient partnership between the operators and the manufacturers. To conclude, as we must remember that there is no such smart system without smart people, and preferably with augmented intelligence than artificial intelligence. As we know that the human mind is stronger than any system, whether it is technical, economical, political, and ideological. As we must remember that in this world, 2 billion people will be urbanized in the next 10 years. 2 billion people have no access to any mean of mobility or accessibility. 2 billion people live with less than $1 a day, and that there will be 2 billion people more on this planet. We can hope that this new industrial revolution, this digital revolution, will contribute to social and economic growth of globalized exchanges thanks to a sustainable, international, integrated, connected chain of mobility. And we can hope that modestly, everything that we are doing, whether we are big companies or startups, all together, we are somehow slightly contributing to this game and goal. Let me finish with one quote, and it was in the 19th century. He was a writer, he was a poet, but he said something which I think can apply today very much so and should not be forgotten by any of our stakeholders. It was Victor Hugo, who said that one day shall come when there will be no battlefields in the world anymore other than markets opening up to the roots of trades and ideas opening up to the gates of intelligence. Thank you very much for your attention.